So you started volunteering at Alcatraz, and what do you do at Alcatraz? What kind?
It's really a wonderful opportunity, and I hope other people might be inspired to do this, because the National Park System is really a wonderful place that not only preserves our parks and our national monuments, but also tells its history. And at Alcatraz, I tell the history of, because there are many layers of history on Alcatraz, and we volunteers get to take people behind the scenes and show a little bit more than what they get from just the audio tour. So if we could look at the tape, I'll show you what we do there on Alcatraz. It's really great being a volunteer at Alcatraz, because you sometimes are meeting 5,000 people a day, and you get to take them behind the scenes to places where not everybody gets to go because there's not always enough staff, but you can take people around the cells, take them inside the cells, and you can show how the cells would open, like here. So this was devised by the same people who did the railroad switches. It's all done by mechanics. It's not electrical. And let's say you want to open all the cells. You put that dial right there to A, push the dial in back. Then you hold down on the clutch, and you pull down and up, and that opens the doors. The men would come to the front of the cell. You blow a second whistle, the officer would open the cell doors. The men would come out, stand, and then face the dining room. Then he'd blow the whistle again, and the officer would close all the cells. You can also go up to the old theater and the old infirmary. We're looking at the operating room of 1930s Alcatraz. It hasn't changed. I mean, that's the original operating table. And you're looking around to see some of the equipment that was still there. The bottles are new, but the cabinets, you know, they all go back to the 1930s. This is the old X-ray room. People can see what X-rays looked like back in the 1930s, the machines. Here's the old pharmacy. You notice they haven't repainted it at all. That bathtub was featured in The Rock with Sean Connery. In fact, he hid in that bathtub. Here we have the place where they showed movies and had the chapel services. This is what the guards looked like in 1934. There's always one person looking up in a picture. There's the chapel, and the movies would be shown there. They didn't show any gangster films, of course. It was all musicals and very light comedies. We're going up now to look down at the catwalks. And this cell block is where the famous escape of 1962 occurred. This is one of those places where you can actually look down and see where the inmates escaped up to the top of the roof, the cell block, and went up to the very roof. They ran across the roof, they ran down over the wall, got down to the water, and they disappeared into history. But the volunteers can actually take people up to show where these events took place. This is a bar spreader that one of the convicts used to get up into the walkway, and he overpowered a guard, and they stole some guns. And this is where the Battle of Alcatraz occurred in 1946. But there are so many layers of Alcatraz history. You know, we can take people to the old power plant where you can see the generators. Some of them are still being used today. And we can also take people into the old laundry. Here's the clothes dryer that Al Capone himself used when he was doing laundry. And we can go through the secret tunnel which connects the west end of the island to the east end of the island. Grand views. Every day is beautiful out there, and it's also a wildlife sanctuary, so it's living history for the birds as well, because there are several species of birds that nest there on Alcatraz. So all in all, it's really an excellent opportunity to meet people, tell history, and be part of a large organization.
Why was that tunnel built?
It was built during the Civil War era because they wanted soldiers to be able to go from the west end of the island to the east end in case they missed shooting at a ship and the ship got on the other side of the island. They could rush over and try to hit it from the other side of the island.
Interesting. I didn't know that. So how do you do living history at a park service?
There are three levels of interpretation of living history. The first person is where you become an actual person and you are acting as that person who lived in history, and you talk in the first person. Second person is when you dress up in a costume, but you're talking like, well, this is what you would do if you lived back then. You would eat this and you would wear these kind of clothes. And third person is where you don't wear a costume. You just talk about what it was like for them at that time in history. If you're going to do first-person interpretation, first-person living history, you really have to do your homework, though, because the Park Service insists that you be totally accurate, as far as we can be accurate, with what life was like back in earlier days.
When you were at Fort Point, what person were you at?
I was Sergeant Michael O'Malley of the 3rd Artillery. And I was from Ireland originally, because in fact most of the soldiers that came to California were from the East Coast, and they originally were from Ireland and England and France, and they were serving in the Army to get their citizenship. All the California soldiers were actually in Utah and Nevada protecting the telegraph lines because the Indians kept cutting them down. So these troops were coming specifically to man the posts at Fort Point and Alcatraz to protect the harbor from any invasion.
Now, I believe we have more information on Alcatraz and the living history setting in the...
As a matter of fact, recently we had several groups of Civil War reenactors come out onto the island. It was a Civil War day, and they came in their uniforms. There was a band. They were there to show people what life was like for a soldier on Alcatraz. So we told people how they ate, what time they got up in the morning, the medicines that they would use. There were civilians who were there as well, dressed in period costume, saying what it was like for the women who had come over to do laundry for the men, or who were wives of the men, and what their role was. And they were really excellent. So maybe we could show a clip of that as well. On our Civil War days in Alcatraz.
I believe that was only a clip, right? So you can see the whole thing?
Yes, you'll see at the end in the credits, there's a YouTube website or place on YouTube where you can go and see that more of that clip on Civil War days at Alcatraz.
Okay, great. So I saw you in there.
Yep, I was a Civil War soldier there.
And so I have a question about where do you get all your costumes?
Well, you know, for the Civil War era, you can actually go online, and there are lots of companies that produce authentic uniforms. And if you even want to buy an 1861 Springfield musket that actually fires, you can spend $1,000 and get an authentic musket of that era. So there are websites you can go to. There are companies that provide those sorts of things. And I want to tell people that there is living history for every era. I've even seen Roman legionnaires camped out in Golden Gate Park in their little tents and their Roman uniforms. So any era that you're interested in, you can get into it.